First up, Capcom sent out this survey. They have this website you could take a survey of feedback because it's like an anniversary or something. I don't know. And it was actually like a pretty cute website. It was like a whole Capcom festival with all their characters and images, and it was not just like a Google form survey. There was a lot of effort put into it. And it's basically like, hey, what do you want us to make? Which is nice. I don't know exactly how substantial this kind of thing is going to be, but just in case, I basically stacked all of my answers to be Mega Man oriented. I haven't talked about Mega Man in a while, but Mega Man, unironically, is one of my favorite things. Just, like, because of this survey, I got pulled into a whole like Mega Man thought theory rabbit hole of just thinking about Mega Man again. And there was one particular question. So first of all, a couple of them were pretty funny. They seemed fairly in tune with whoever decided the wording of the questions and the answers kind of knew what they were doing. Because one of them was like, what's your biggest complaint with Capcom as a company? And it was things like reboot old IPs already, which is the one that I clicked on. One of them was like too money oriented, which I thought was funny. It was stuff like that, relatively lighthearted. There was one question that I found really interesting, which was, hey, if you could pick an old Capcom series for us to do a remake of, what would it be? And there was a couple options that were kind of interesting, but the one that really grabbed me was the Mega Man 1 through 3 option. Not just Mega Man, like the original, or Mega Man 2 or something, but Mega Man 1 through 3 specifically, which I think is pretty interesting. They did most of the other answers were kind of like that. I might have even clicked on like, I actually don't think I went with the Mega Man answer for this one. I think I clicked on like Demon's Crest because Demon's Crest is so cool. But I thought about it and I was like, you know what, actually, because my first reaction was, you don't need to remake Mega Man 1 again. You already did that in like 2000 and when did Powered Up come out? Was that like Mega Man Powered Up? That wasn't 2009, was it? 2006. Wow, that's a lot earlier than I thought it was. On the PSP, you already remade Mega Man 1 on the PSP. I'm like, you don't have to sell me another Mega Man remake, right? But then I thought about it and I was like, actually, because this isn't just the first game, it's the first 3. And there are things that you could do to improve those games that don't even really require you to change that much. Like stuff that could potentially be fixed with something like a ROM hack. For instance, Mega Man 2. The first ever video on my channel was about Mega Man 2 and how I think it has more flaws than people tend to acknowledge. And I still stand by basically everything I said in that video, and I think that a lot of the later Mega Man games are actually a lot better designed than 2, but I was thinking about it and I was like, so one of the big problems with that game is, so from my perspective, and this is like, you can like different things about Mega Man, right? But I have things that I like about the series, and one of the things, my favorite thing is the variety and the usage of all the special weapons. To me, that's like the main hook of the series, is you defeat a boss and then you steal its power. I think that's super cool, and it's really unique, and that usually gets people interested when you mention that to them. So, like, one of the reasons Mega Man 6 is one of my favorite is my favorite of the classic series and one of my favorites of the entire franchise is because the weapon design is really well balanced. All of them fill different uses. They have different properties, directions they go, areas of the screen that they cover, different utility. There's no truly bad weapon, Plant shield is fine, or plant barrier. It's fine. But like, especially once you get to the last half of the game, the castle stages, and I just find myself constantly switching between weapons to deal with different situations. And there's a couple, because there is so much flexibility in the arsenal, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach certain situations. You know, do you want to shield something? Do you want to use the silver tomahawk? That's the one that goes upwards. You can use like Nightman's like boomerang mace thing in a certain way. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can actually do with it. And to me, that kind of like open toolbox of options available to the player honestly shaped a lot of my taste in games. And that's one of the things that I find kind of disappointing about Mega Man 2 is that there are neat weapons in that game. I really like Air Shooter, for instance. But they literally all just get obliterated by Metal Blade. Metal Blade is just way too good, and I don't even want to have to explain why it's the most broken thing in the entire franchise. It's already been well tread on. You can go back and watch that old video of mine. Probably has bad audio and all that. But yeah, in order to Metal Blade makes it's like almost laughable how strong, how overpowered it is, and to me, that makes the game kind of boring. Like, that takes away a big part of what I find fun about the Mega Man games. And you have to, like, dedicate yourself to doing, like, basically a challenge run to use the Metal Blade as little as possible. Which basically means just never using it. Because it is the best possible option in almost every single situation in the game. So if you just don't use the Metal Blade, and you have to use the rest of the weapons, it can be fun, although there's other things holding it back. Namely, and this is where, okay, if you were going to do a Mega Man 2 remake, this is what I would say are like prime things, is you have to fix the weapon balance to make the game a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more fun. And that means, number one, balancing Metal Blade in some way. Put actually some kind of limitation on it, or It's literally just the master of all in terms of range, energy efficiency, damage, places on the screen that it can cover, like literally everything. And it has an infinite energy exploit, which is like so funny. Like, oh yeah, also you can just never run out of energy at all if you're using the Metal Blade kind of thing. To make it even more broken. So balance it in some way. I don't know how, but in some way. Make it cost more, give it a more limited range, some kind of different behavior. I don't know. The other thing is that you need to adjust the enemy weakness tables. So a lot of people don't know this. Most people are familiar with the fact that all the bosses in Mega Man games have unique weaknesses to all of the different weapons, right? So they're all weak. It's like a rock, paper, scissors. And that's why there's certain boss orders where you get one boss's weakness weapon and then, you know, go through the order, go through the chain, right? Most people don't know that actually applies to every single enemy in all the games. They all have a table of weapons, like how much damage they take from each weapon. And one of the issues with 2 is that the tables like don't make a lot of sense and are also, again, heavily skewed towards Metal Blade. So there's situations where, for instance, like Bubble Lead is only useful like twice. It's only useful in like 2 screens of the game, I guess, not counting like the final boss. But there's situations where you feel like it should be useful and it's just not, because it doesn't do any damage to the enemies. And it leads to like kind of annoying situations where you're like, oh, should I just use Metal Blade? Yeah, I should just use Metal Blade. Stuff like that really hampers the game, because there are like neat things that you can do with having all the different, you know, enemy weaknesses to the various weapons. And there are interesting kind of strategies that you can form as a player if you know that they are weak to certain weapons. But the game just isn't, again, like you can really tell in certain ways that it was made on their off time. It was a game that was made as basically a hobby, like a passion project by the team, and they just didn't have the time to really fine tune things. There's a lot of stuff that you could polish up in that regard. You could do the same for all three of those first three games, that first original trilogy. 2, I think, probably needs it the most. Although 3, I'd have to go replay 3 and actually like do a more like comprehensive personal breakdown of that game. 3's, I feel like its biggest problem has always been like the weird padding in that second half with the Doc Robot stages. That's something that you could improve. You could make those a lot more interesting and actual, unique stages in some kind of way. I think you can keep Doc Robot. You keep him in some capacity because he is a part of the game, and I think you should preserve that in a remake. Hey, another thing to fix about Mega Man 2, that fucking Boo Beam trap. It's called the Boo Beam trap. It's the one where you have to use the crash bombers, and unless you go in with literally full ammo for your crash bombers and you don't miss a single shot, you literally can't finish it because you need every single shot to destroy all of the walls in the right order and destroy the traps, like the turrets. And the game suffers from that probably wouldn't happen in a remake, but in the original, there's like awful slowdown and sprite flickering that makes it like, oh god, it's one of the worst bosses in the series, in my opinion. But there are genuinely a lot of things that you could do to improve those games, and I read some comments about this survey, which mentioned basically saying that Capcom can absolutely, there's so much appeal to be found in Mega Man, but Capcom just has to commit to giving the series some time, for people to get to know it or be introduced to it, actual jumping on points. 11, I thought 11 was actually really good. I thought 11 was a really good game, but it wasn't gonna get that many people really into the series. Number 1, it's called Mega Man 11. And number 2, it just wasn't that big of a production. Mega Man games usually aren't. I think you would need to do something a little bigger, a bigger scope project than just a single Mega Man game, which generally are pretty short, kind of sweet experiences. And something like a remake of it's actually 3 games, I think could be a decent jumping on point to be like, hey, you don't know shit about Mega Man, because if you think about it, Mega Man 11 came out in 2017. It's been 7 or 8 years since then. If you were in the first grade when that game came out, you're now going into high school, and there has never been a mainline Mega Man game released in all of that time to make everyone feel old here, including me. And Mega Man, right? I think everyone can enjoy Mega Man, but it is a series that is primarily marketed towards kids, and you if you're going to make one, you're going to be marketing it towards a younger audience, and you have to introduce the character to them in some way. They were able to do this with the Resident Evil remakes really effectively, not so much to a younger audience, but to a new target, the same target audience, but new people, RE7 came out and everyone was actually really stoked on that. I'm whoa, they actually kind of figured it out and they made a really cool game. And then the RE2 remake comes out after that, and I think that remake was really good at getting new people in, because I've kind of heard, Leon's in this game, okay, well, I know who Leon is, but this is kind of where his story kind of begins and all that. So it's it doesn't have the weight of a number 7 or 8 on it. But it's 2 remake, things are probably going to be a little simpler in terms of what I'm expected to know. and it's introductions to a lot of these characters and concepts and locations, and it helps if the game was good. That helps. I think you could do something like that with those first couple Mega Man games. You could do that to the first 3. You could do that to 4 through 6. I think 4 through 6 needed less. 1 through 3 could benefit from like a brushing up. I think you could see that in Powered Up, where it's like, oh, okay. I actually don't think Powered Up changed that much gameplay wise, besides like adding some new content, new characters, playable characters. That's all great stuff to include in a remake. You could also throw that in. Oh, that would be perfect for 3. You could unlock Proto Man. Yeah, that would be great. It doesn't quite make sense for him to be in Mega Man 1 yet. But to like make like these, it would also, the other thing is that it's very doable. Like on that survey, some of those other remakes was like Onimusha 1, 2, and 3, and you're like, that seems like a lot of work. Mega Man games have historically been pretty cheap to make, and with a quick turnaround time. Like they put those things out on the yearly, and we're mostly reusing, well, for the first 3 games, reusing kind of like a lot of the same technology, and just, like practically making like just using a level editor to make the new games. You could, I think you wouldn't need like an RE2 remake sized budget to do like a decent remake of those first 3. What would you do if you were to remake like 4 through 6? I don't know. You could probably rebalance 5 a little bit. 5 has some, in my opinion, I think 5... Actually, you could... That's another thing. You could also go back and polish 5 up a bit. 5 has... I don't think it's bad at all. I don't think any of those games are actually bad. 5, my problem has always been that like the weapons... Again, the weapon balancing is really, really off. A lot of them are just kind of bad and not very useful. A lot of them fulfill the same functions. There's like half of them travel along the floor, and that's what they do. Rush slide? Rush slide? Power slide. That's what they call it. Charge Man. Charge slide? Is that what it's called? What the fuck is it called? The shitty slide. It is so bad. It's so bad. You never use it. Power Stone, that's the one I'm thinking of. Stone Man's weapon. That one's bad and hard to use. A lot of the weapons just suffer from being kind of hard to use and not that useful. Trying to think of ones that are even like that good in that game. I guess Wave Man's is fine. Napalm Man's is fine. Although again, they do kind of the same thing. You could do some fixing up with that roster. The Mega Man Maker actually already implemented at least one, like in one of the first builds of that game that was released. They made it so that you could use the charge slide, the power, whatever the fuck it is, charge slide, I think, in the air as a mobility option to get like an air dash. That's actually cool. That's a cool idea that you could implement. Yeah. And then you just kind of made the charge buster shot. That's the other thing. The weapons aren't very good, and the charge shot is really good. It's the strongest it ever was. They balanced it to be a little smaller in 6, and I think that's like perfect for it. But in 5, it just fucking blows through everything. Also, maybe like toned down. It's so weird. In 5, you just get dumped with extra lives. They just throw so many on you. It's like noticeably more than the other games. Personally, I think 6 is like perfectly balanced. That's my creme de la crop. Some people will disagree with that, but I think appreciation for 6 has gone up a lot in recent years, especially among like the Mega Man online community kind of thing. Yeah, I would be down for that. I would actually be really down for a cool remake of those first 3 games to kind of test the waters. I think you could easily, yeah, I think that would be actually a really good way to kind of sell and like keep going, because Powered Up was supposed to be a series. They were going to remake all of those games. There were already plans for this. And then I don't know if it just didn't sell that well, or it was just because it was on the PSP, or was it maybe because Inafune left? I have no idea. I'm sure there is a reason for it that might even be publicly known. I don't know about it. Yeah, that's my Mega Man spiel out of the way. That would be cool.